Hi there. Thanks for having me today.
Hi, how are you? I'm Rasmus Faber. I'm a composer and musician, pianist, DJ from Sweden. And I'm talking now to.
I'm Ibon Martinez. I work for KORG. I live here in Japan in the headquarters, and I do artist relations and marketing. Nice to see you.
So we've gotten to know each other like over the last year or so, doing some exchanges with myself and Korg through Ibon, and then we've talked for a while about having these conversations on different topics, like can be anything like anime related or house music or really anything we want to talk about. So this is maybe the first introduction to a series of videos where we'll go through whatever we want and maybe whatever you want as well, if you want to chime in and say what you want to see in what you want to see us discuss.
Definitely. The first time we met was last year in the Tokyo Billboard, and you were playing some jazzy anime tunes, right?
That's right. We were playing with my anime jazz cover project Platina Jazz. So we usually play in Japan, or we used to. We're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic right now, so all traveling is a little uncertain right now. But up until now, we've been playing in Japan with this project for maybe once a year or so for the last I would say 10 years.
Because all the people I have around and Japanese friends and stuff, most people know you because of that project, which is quite interesting. How many albums have you released from that project, or how many tracks have you arranged?
Yeah. So it's we're I think we've now broken the 100 songs barrier. So we've rearranged more than 100 anime opening and ending themes um, into jazz over 6 studio albums, 2 live albums, and 1 live DVD, and several video projects. So it used to be. I mean, when we started like 10 years ago, it was more of an album project. But then recently, as we got more and more international followers, we expanded. So now it's almost like the YouTube channel is our main, is kind of our main home now, with the albums sort of coming on the side. So it's kind of an interesting development for us as well.
Yeah, so it's been a really popular project, right? But that's not where your career started in Japan. Like how were the beginnings?
Yeah, no, that's definitely like a side project that just kind of grew bigger and bigger. So the way I started my career in Japan is back in 2005. I had only been producing for a couple of years, so I released my first record, which was a house music single in 2002. So I've been at it for a couple of years, and I had released one track in 2003 called Ever After, which was a song that hit the club scene quite big in Japan back then. So it got played for a year or two by a lot of DJs and on radio and stuff. And then I think that attention led to me being contacted by a guy from the record company Victor Entertainment, affiliate of JVC. And his name is Hirofumi Iwanaga, and he's been working as my manager ever since then, but in different positions. So he contacted me and just kind of told me about this, because this was before social media was really like big. So I didn't really know like this all this was going on the Japanese club scene. So
How did it happen? So it just like the song just became popular out of like just some DJ discovered the track somehow on a streaming service, or
well, this was before streaming services. This was in 2005. I mean, this was so probably. I mean, the club scene was kind of like. I mean, it was definitely harder to get to get your hands on new music. So it was more a thing about where DJs would, you know, stay really educated and go into record shops and kind of buy vinyl, and there would be like these internal charts of what's hot in the world and in the club scenes and stuff, and then, you know, like they would follow certain labels and then check the music from there. And then I think for some reason this track had a kind of like a harmonic vibe and a sort of, yeah, it had a vibe that just really fit into that to the Japanese club scene. It was kind of like coming at the same time as some of the early Mondo Grosso stuff, and it was kind of like, yeah, it was kind of just the starting point of where that sound became popular, which was then a little bit later. Kind of Cascade came into that. The producer Cascade came into that as well, and then there was a fair bit of Japanese producers as well. But this was kind of just in the beginning of that phase, I think, which was, I mean, later in the beginning was kind of Latin house, and then it became it morphed a little bit, and then it even got its own name in Japan, which was kind of like Otome house. So like romantic house. So it was this like house music with kind of big and voluptuous chords and you know, sort of a bittersweet harmonics and that kind of vibe.
Big thing when you start a new genre altogether, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know to what, like, I don't know if I can be you know, like really credited with the actual start of it, and I don't know who coined the name, but it just started popping up like that there was this name that came from it. And I think there was like me and Cascade were probably among the ones who sort of made the most of that, at least from outside of Japan. And then there were like, I mean, I think DJ Kawasaki was a DJ who was kind of like, he was kind of maybe more in the soulful camp, but kind of bordering on that. And then also Daishi Dance was coming out and becoming quite big on that side. So
I see, and that led to whole new projects in Japanese business, right?
yeah, so then jumping back, so Hirofumi contacted me and said he wanted to release that record along with basically anything else that I had done, and release it as like as an album on Victor Entertainment on JVC. So I hadn't produced that much at that time, so I think I made like one or two new tracks and then compiled like everything else that I've done. We licensed all the remixes that I'd done up until that point and stuff, and then so that came out as an album. Was I think in 2006 maybe that album came out, I think, and it was called So Far. And then that album became quite big on the sort of house music market and even the kind of general music market and on radio and stuff. So that's spurred me coming into Japan a lot for DJing, and I did DJ tours in Japan for a couple of years, almost 2, 3, 4 times a year. Sorry, go ahead.
So how is in your experience, how is it working in the Japanese music industry for you? Because I bet there are a lot of young producers out there who live, I don't know, in Europe, in America, and they're wondering how to set foot in Japan, how to start in the music business here, how to, you know, what would you advise them?
Well, so I think the way that I started isn't really available anymore. In a way, I think it's like it's both good and bad, but like the Japanese music industry was more insulated then than it is now. So it used to be that I mean, that maybe a Japanese record label would pick up an artist that they thought would fit the Japanese market and then do like a full-on local promotion kind of thing. But now Japan has kind of the same music environment as the whole rest of the world. Like it's all the same streams and YouTube views and everything that everyone's going after. So there's much more of like, you know, things can organically grow, and sort of get an organic hype in a way that it couldn't really do before, which is the nice part. And sort of the maybe the less good side of it is that it's hard to build something. Like if you think that an artist has potential but maybe it's not really there yet, it's kind of hard to make that climb. So in that sense, yeah, I mean it's tougher now in the sense that you can't really direct your efforts to a Japanese music career, but you just have to make good music. And if it gets popular somewhere. And I mean, I even had that experience. Like, I talked to some producers who, like, maybe back in 2008 or 10 or something like that, when we were kind of discussing our careers, and we kind of realized that there was producers that made fairly similar music to that I did, and they for some reason got just like really big in like Russian speaking countries or South America or something, and then they just ended up going there on tour a lot, and we couldn't really completely figure out. It's like you just take off in one direction and then you just go really far there, and then just that just sort of becomes a wheel that just keeps spinning. So it's all really random. Like, it's hard to make any kind of directed goals in that sense.
It's true that I feel too that the Japanese market was way more closed before, and there were a lot. It was more influenced by whatever, like the promotion company or the recording company decided that the next big artist was, and where their marketing was headed to, headed the Japanese. But now that we have all the streaming services available, a track that gets popular in America, gets popular in Europe, suddenly can become popular in Japan as well, or even other platforms such as TikTok or other platforms where one song will suddenly get super popular for random reason, and then you get to Japan. But you also mentioned that there was something about the first track that made you into the Japanese scene that clicked musically with the country, or with the, like, harmonically was fitting. So how would you put yourself in terms of your musical style that is appealing to the Japanese public, and not only Japanese in general, of course?
I mean, I think there is a certain, like, so I'm definitely a bit on the, like, romantic house side. I'm definitely a bit on that sort of romantic. Yeah, I do have that romantic style a little bit in my chords, which is kind of like, yeah, slightly melodramatic, and also a little bit sort of, there's a melancholy and a bit of nostalgia in there, even though I also like to make things quite energetic. So in that sense, I think a lot of the Japanese tonality has a lot of that. There's a bit of innocence to the harmonies, which I also feel quite attached to for some reason. And then just exploring that within a house music, or like a dance music context, was like, yeah, it was quite a strong formula then. I hadn't really, like, whereas, I mean, sometimes those types of chords, when used in a kind of European club music context, becomes almost too sort of emotional. Like, there's in the European club scene, we kind of want a little bit, we either want a bit more toughness, or we want a bit more distance, maybe a tinge of irony or something like that. There's rarely that sort of pure emotionality, so that sort of is probably why I feel a little bit more yeah, that I mean, the Japanese music sort of world and my own sort of musical brain kind of speaks together on that level.
Yeah, I think it makes so much sense because when you listen to a lot of Japanese music, and it's true that in the harmonies, um, just even listening to normal tracks in Europe, in America, I think we like things that are much more straightforward. You get a lot more, you know, the normal 2-5-1 with just like the least amount of notes, whatever. But here they really like these complex chords, which have like a bit of positive and negative, happy and sad inside. And I think it also fits a lot. For example, all of the shows, for example, the themes and shows that the Japanese public likes, and of course a lot of fans overseas that treat a lot also about the maybe the vulnerability of the characters, for example. So it's also interesting to show this part in the music, and you have a big career as well making songs for the animation industry, right?
Yeah, that sort of came after a while. So I was touring in Japan sort of between 2005 6 and then 2010 12, around there. I toured really heavily as a DJ on the house music scene, and the Japanese music world and club scene was going through quite a big shift then. So it was actually like, I think in a way Japan had a little bit of the same downturn in the music industry as the West had like 5-8 years earlier, but Japan sort of kept the strength a little bit longer because of the strong physical CD market and the sort of the culture around the physical market, which has never been that strong in the West. So we kind of like we fell sort of in the sort of very early, like around the year 2000, I guess. There was really like this sort of super low point in in the Western music industry, and then that hit Japan. I think, yeah, maybe, yeah, let's say 5 or 10 years later, and at the same time, sort of EDM was popping up on the club scenes everywhere, which made the club music become a little bit more commercialized and also a little bit more festival driven. So it sort of became a little bit of a new thing. I was going around Japan a lot, and I played in a lot of small cities, and so I did kind of like I did sort of fairly big shows in Tokyo, but I also did a lot of like quite small shows in small cities, which I really loved. And then you could see that sort of that scene waning a little bit. So those club nights that had like proper club music, they weren't doing as well as before. So a lot of the smaller clubs, they kind of switched to, they didn't really switch to other types of sort of kind of credible club music, but they were more like switching to playing, just commercial radio stuff. In some sense, in some places they were switching more to like maybe more urban genres and stuff. So the landscape was changing there, and then also because of the music industry changing as well. My manager, Mr. Iwanaga, he was also getting a little bit more into the anime world, and I had been watching and sort of keeping an eye on the anime industry a little bit. I mean, I wasn't watching anime a lot, but I knew enough about the music and the sort of the scene to be interested, and I always sort of liked the expression. So so my manager started to going into that side a little bit, and he managed to land an opportunity for me to make a song for Megumi Nakajima, who sang who made the lead role for Ranka Lee in the Macross Frontier series, which I had seen and loved, and also loved the music by Yoko Kanno in that series. So I got the chance to make an opening theme or pitch. Actually, I was asked to submit to basically a little contest to to make a opening for this new anime where she was going to sing the opening theme, and then I managed to make a song that they went for, and then then things just started going on from there, and this was maybe 2010, 2011.
So for people who don't know, Nakajima Megumi is one of the biggest voice actresses in Japan. She's hugely popular even these days. And back then, when you say when Macros was released, it was quite big, and even these days it's still super popular in the karaoke. So you said something very interesting, which is what they call the concept of kompe here in Japan, which is what most young musicians, young composers who don't have a career or reputation yet have to go through if they want to get their tracks used in a project of some kind. So basically, it's how the music industry works a little bit in Japan, is that side of you put the work first, you create the track first, you pitch it, and if you're lucky, then we might keep your track for the project. So that was how it worked for you as well at the beginning. So you didn't have they didn't commit, and they didn't ask you to make the track. They asked you to pitch the track, and you were competing against other options, right?
That's right. So I think, I mean, and it's the same thing in the West. I mean, maybe not so much in movie related matters, but like in just the general commercial music industry, that's kind of the norm. Like you pitch and submit demos. I mean, but I think in this, in this case and other cases relating to anime, like the competition is a little bit more closed. So maybe you have maybe 5 or 10 producers, composers who they all are sort of like think that might come up with something good. They're all kind of like they're pitching in a bit more kind of directed and close way. It's not like you have thousands of people sending in tracks. So it's not an open competition in that sense, but it's more like the producers are picking a couple of people that they think might fit, and then they ask them to do something. So yeah, and I mean it happens even now.
Yeah. Like how did it work for you? For example, did you when you were about to do this track, did you have an initial talk with management and their producers, and did they put a request list, or were you aiming for something in particular when you made the track? Were you like
Musically, you mean?
yeah, musically, yeah.
I mean, no, I think I was actually just inspired enough by the fact that I was going to work with Nakajima Megumi, and then kind of knowing where I came from and what they reasonably was looking for, asking me. So it's kind of like a house music thing. So not like a total Japanese sounding thing, but a little bit more, like a bit of a crossover thing was what I imagined, and that was probably a good idea. Later, I've produced some things where she sang, which is more like a much more Western sounding track. But then I had her feature on my album. But for the anime stuff, I sort of kept it a bit half on the Western versus Japanese influences. So yeah, no, I think I just knowing then that I would be working with her voice, who is definitely on the top of my list of Japanese voices still, was kind of like, yeah, that was inspiration enough.
Mm-hmm. So did that project, like when you pitched the initial track, did you also start from the original 89 seconds requirement, or did you already have the whole track in your head?
I think then I wasn't really like, I mean, nowadays I would start with 89-second version. So for those of you again who don't know what I'm talking about, is that the anime opening themes are always 89 seconds long. Sometimes the most challenging part of making an anime opening theme is to fit the whole song or like not the whole song, but just like the most interesting part of the structure within that 89 seconds, including like an intro and an outro to have a sort of like a nice dynamic flow to it, but then to also being able to expand that into a song of 3, 4, 5 minutes length. I think for Try Unite, which was the name of the song that I wrote there in the beginning for Megumi, I probably I can't remember precisely, but I'm pretty sure I started with the whole song, because I just wasn't really aware of how things worked.
Because that's like, I don't know, but maybe if you get like an 89-second requirement or whichever time limit, I guess, and if you want to do a house track, for example, most people will just go, okay, I'll divide this by 4 and I'll get my BPM, whatever, right? But for example, in your track, I think the very beginning of the track, which is also used subsequently, is very memorable because it starts with these 5 chords that hit you suddenly, like, what the hell am I listening to? And then you have like a 5/4 before it goes to your normal 4/4, and it ends up fitting, but it's quite a very original use of tempo at the beginning. Were you also trying to put something at the very beginning of the track on top to get the producers listening right away to the track? Like, were you thinking about those kind of things when you made it?
I'm not sure. I think I probably was thinking something about where, so the song has a really long intro before that section comes in, but in the 89-second version, that is kind of the start of the song. So it's, yeah, I mean, it kind of has this bit of a rhythmical flair thing with changing the time signature a little bit and stuff. And I guess I just imagined that if you're watching something, then you want like a bit of a sassy beginning, which I think is true for most of the. I mean, it depends a little bit on the type of opening, but I mean, a lot of openings that at least you want something in there in the intro that sort of grabs your attention, whether it's like some kind of unique sound or whatever it might be.
So when you are pitching this track to the producers, for you, is it sound-wise, when you pitch it, is it almost close to what will be the final arrangement in terms of instruments or in terms of mixing, or will you later on re-record some parts, use maybe musicians to record, I don't know, strings or different parts of the track? Like, what is the process for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe just make a small cut there because I had to. I'm sort of starting to run out of batteries a little bit, but I have 10%, so maybe we can sort of. Yeah. But we've gone for like maybe a little bit more than 20 minutes, so maybe we'll do like another 5 minutes. I think my battery should last for that long. Okay. Sorry, what was the question again?
Sorry. So when you first submit.
Oh yeah.
Users.
Right.
What is the level of completeness, I will say?
Yeah, I mean that's always like a really tough balance, because like obviously I don't want to work too much on something that I then have to throw away, and also there's often changes and requests for changes that come in later, such as like key changes to fit the singer's range even better and stuff like that. So if I have recorded already lots of material, that's going to put me in a bit of trouble. So I think I always try. I mean, these days, one thing I do is I don't usually pitch anymore in terms of like, I don't do the competition thing, but I'm still asked to do a demo before which they in theory have the right to refuse. So I tried to make the 89-second version. I tried to make something that sounds sort of as impressive as possible, and then just kind of like yeah, sketch out certain things. Like I wouldn't record like real strings, and maybe, yeah, I wouldn't record any live instruments basically until I have like the go ahead and the key and everything. So there are definitely some compromises to the demo, but they still, I think they still expect the demo to sound quite good. But I mean, it's even worse actually in the pop music industry, because there, like, it has to basically sound like completely finished. And even considering the demo vocals, because what I do is, like, I actually have a technique where I kind of pitch my own voice up to sing the melody that I've written before there are any lyrics to it, because I would write a melody for a song, and then only later there will be, when it's approved and everything, a lyricist will come in and write lyrics, and then a vocal will be recorded. So I will have my sort of like pitched up sort of na 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 vocals, which is like never. I mean, that's not. I mean, that's not the best sounding thing. Like, it sounds, it's maybe at best sort of non-disturbing, but it's definitely not like a good sound. So that's a compromise already. But it's like that's the way we can do it. And again, I mean, that's not even accept. I mean, if you work with maybe like, yeah, Western pop, sort of high level commercial pop music, or even like K-pop or something, they would expect there to be, or even like commercial J-pop, they would expect like a full-fledged demo vocal with English lyrics, with a singer that is good, and that they then replace. But like, I'm lucky that that requirement isn't upon me, because that's just such an unnecessary unnecessary boring step to do, to write like lyrics for something and then just throw those lyrics away.
Because now, like, the limit between the composer and the arranger, there's some really blurred lines in the pop world, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, in Japan, the word arranger is used a lot for the word that we use in the West is more like producer only. So there's actually like, yeah, there's a role for the arranger aside from the producer, which is rarely used unless it's more like a classical, or maybe a jazz type of scenario. So you don't really have one person arranging the music and then another person producing it. So I'm always just the producer. But that is sometimes that's called arranger in Japan. So whenever you see like arranger written on like a sort of Japanese anime music related thing, just assume that that's the producer, that's the guy who made all the sounds and made all the, all the things around there that make sound. And then there can be another person who actually wrote the song and wrote the chords and the melody. In my case, usually I work with just the stuff that I wrote myself. But
Happen often that there are composers that just write the basic melody and chords without actually making a track, or that's just something that is just like reserved for the big artists that just
no, I think
somewhere else do it.
no, I think especially it depends a little bit on which market we're talking about. But for example, like I've written songs sort of very very scratchy, kind of like just sketchy stuff, and then just had that song being produced by someone else for something else. And yeah, that has happened. And then I've also, so in the I've produced a song that Yoko Kanno wrote on one occasion, where she wrote something and then made a demo with her. I guess she has a team of producers around her that, I guess, those in the Japanese context would often be called sound producers, which is also a term that we don't really use much in the Western music world. Sort of, it's all one person who usually does things. But yeah, I've produced a song that she wrote. And then I think it's also quite common if say someone writes lyrics and melodies mainly, maybe they will just sort of like make simple accompanying themselves on guitar or something, or like simple piano, and then maybe someone else will sort of take that song and make it into something.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. Talk a bit more about the song that you wrote with Kanno Yoko, who is just a legend in the Japanese music industry. Well, how did that come to be? Talk us about the song.
The song is called Kiniro, and then it's sung by Megumi Nakajima as well, and it's one of her albums, and I think, yeah, I don't know what was the initial story behind that song, but for some reason I guess they just felt that it should have my my production on it, or I remember when I got the demo, it was already sounding sort of quite finished, so maybe they had used it for something and then decided to take it to the different direction. And sort of in hindsight, I actually like how that song turned out, but I think I overdid it a little bit. Like, I got the basic rudimentary structure, but then I just sort of went, well, I can say I took the arrangement really, really seriously. So I kind of did all these, like, extra stuff with like key changes, and like I extended the song. It's like 8 minutes long or like whatever. But I thought maybe I have one shot at working with Yoko Kanno like this. So but I haven't worked with her since. So it could be that my plan failed miserably. Maybe she was like not happy about all the changes I did to her music.
It was a good flex.
It was a flex. Yeah, that was actually probably what it was. I mean, I was younger then.
I see. So you also mentioned that the lyricist is something that comes afterwards when it comes to these animation songs. So you will just you will get freedom to write your song, to write your melodies, and then a posteriori someone else will write lyrics on top of your humming melody thing.
Right. So
An initial idea for the concept of the melody, like for example, what will be the thematic, or what are the things that this song should be talking about.
I will never know that, and I don't think it would have mattered much if I did. And it's sometimes I actually don't even know what the song is about in the end. But I would also say that, like, it's, yes, the way Japanese lyrics are made is quite unrelatable to me, from my point of view, just thinking in terms of mainly English lyrics, because we tend to use the integration between the melody and the lyrics in English is much stronger, and I think that's probably has to do with, like, the way that English is a bit more of a tonal language, or not a bit more, but it's actually a kind of quite a strongly tonal language as opposed to Japanese. So it's when I write a lyric, a melody that will have Japanese lyrics, I will think more in terms of almost like as a melody for an instrument. So it's not as dependent on one particular word having like a really particular rhythm flowing at a certain space in that melody. So that's one of the sort of interesting aspects of making music for Japanese lyrics, is that there is that tension of where, and also that I think Japanese, in a way, like, I could be getting this a little bit wrong, but like Japanese sort of officially doesn't really have sort of emphasis on syllables, yet it kind of does anyway. Like, it doesn't have it in theory, and sometimes when I speak to Japanese people about it, they'll say that there is no difference, but you can clearly hear that, like, if someone say like arigato, there is an emphasis there, even though it's like not official. Like, it's but it means that when you put that word in a lyric, sort of on a melody, it would sound really strange to me if it goes against the melody I hear in that word when it's used in normal speech, but that seems to not bother Japanese listeners so much. So it's like I'm reading into the spoken word a kind of official emphasis on syllables that isn't really there, something like that. So that kind of, yeah, it's kind of like a nice, yeah, maybe something for us to have like a specially dedicated episode about this whole thing. We should probably have someone who actually speaks like a Japanese native. I don't know how you're are you perfectly fluent in Japanese?
Nowadays, I will say that I am rather fluent.
All right. Okay. Cool.
When I first came to Japan, I wasn't at all. That was like 8 years ago, and I was completely lost. I really liked Japanese music by then as well. So as you say, because of the lack of tonality in the language, it's funny how sometimes when you speak with some Japanese and they will talk to you in English, sometimes you will not know if they are telling you something or asking a question, because the intonation, like when you get a question, it will go up, or like things that will happen in
Right.
French, right, English, whatever. But in Japanese, they don't mind so much about it. And it's funny also, like now that I actually understand the lyrics of the songs and whatever. And by the way, my office is full of Japanese, so it's I'm one of the few foreigners in the headquarters, so it's Japanese mails every day. But it's always funny to listen to songs that I knew back when I didn't know Japanese. Now I understand what the lyrics meant, and I'm surprised at how different are. Like, they're talking about completely different things than what the song just transmitted, just from the melody and the chords. Have you ever been surprised reading the English translation of some of the lyrics in your songs and be like, oh, I didn't realize this song was about this? Or
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've been, I have, and then also, I mean, sometimes it's like, I mean, on both ends. It's like sometimes I'm just like, wow, is really all, is it just like starlight and rainbows and stuff, and that's just all this song is about? It's just like flying through the sky and it's rainbows and starfalls and blah blah blah. But then on the other hand, it's like sometimes it's just like, wow, this is like incredibly complex. And then also, like, I also starting to pick up on where I know that certain things is like the subtleties doesn't come through in English. So in English it's just a sentence, but it's just like I've started to recognize, at least to my sort of rudimentary understanding, I've started to recognize where it's like, okay, this is actually probably a word. This is probably a word for a rather deep concept that in English gets translated to some, like rare word that no one ever uses. But then in Japanese, it's like actually like a concept that has a lot of meaning, and that sort of like that will affect all the words around it and that kind of stuff. So it's like
that happens a lot, actually. Like
mm,
these words or these concepts are not really a thing outside of Japan.
yeah,
When some things like get really lost in translation, or when you see the word by word translation, it just like it can sound kind of dumb sometimes, but it actually really it makes sense in Japanese, which is always funny.
yeah. But there's definitely a lot of interesting things that can happen there. It's like, and also I think that the really good lyricists, the really good Japanese lyricists, they've have a nice understanding of this as well. So like they will not like, but it's the same as in, like, if you have a really poor English lyric, which will like emphasize the wrong syllable in a word. That's like you cringe a little bit, right? It's like, you know, like it feels wrong. And that sense is probably not as strong in Japanese, but there's definitely a sense where the good Japanese lyricists will still adhere to that sort of very, very subtle thing, right? And then there's certain things that you would avoid, like even though like just the letter N is like technically a syllable in Japanese, right? But that doesn't mean that you can sing the N on any word. So sometimes if it's like, sometimes it happens that you have this like this N sound or like a double vowel, like the EE thing, and you have that just on a very, very strange place where you really need like a consonant to kind of to nail the rhythm in that phrase. And then sometimes I will go back and forth a little bit with lyricists, but I also noted that like the experienced lyricists, they often get that, so they will put those sort of difficult syllables in kind of soft places where it can be sung easily, and then they make it so that the melody is more easily sung to the vocalist, which is really, yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, super helpful.
Back and forth going on with the lyricist. It's not just like, hey, this is what the lyrics are. So there is.
Yeah, I mean, because I mean, ideally for me, I mean, even if it's, so usually, I mean, the time and the opportunity for me to like do a lot of like, you know, I don't want to go in and ask them to like rewrite everything, and then because it's kind of like hard as well when you. But if you know, in the ideal cases, yeah, I have a little bit of back and forth with the lyricist, at least for some key places. It's like, yeah, I really need like a couple of hard consonants for the singer to nail that fast run up to that high note, that kind of stuff. So that's in the ideal case. Or, you know, sometimes you just like you read the lyrics and you realize, oh, okay, the lyricist already thought of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is also like when you're like with Japanese lyrics, for example, one of the things I find interesting in Japanese songs is that even though, for example, like as you say, like melodically, it might not have as much complexity as you can have with English lyrics or Latin-derived lyrics that are much more integrated with the melody. In the Japanese language, because it has this many different levels of expression, you can express things indirectly just by using certain words in some way, and you can storytell in a different way. For example, like just by the use of words, you can tell if these two characters are really close to each other, or they are kind of like they know each other but not that you know, which is something that in English you will need something more, you know, like some words or some other expression in order to show these things that are in Japanese easy to show just by the use of this particular word.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, yeah, there's the I see what you mean. I mean, there's definitely stuff like that there are things that make me jealous of the Japanese language sometimes as well, when I, you know, when I see the translation in English and then sort of like just hear the word, and this really, there's some really powerful stuff that you can, there's a level of subtlety that you can reach, I think, in Japanese language, which is a little bit different than what you can do in English, which is, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also interesting how some bands, for example, nowadays might combine English words with Japanese words in the same song lyrics to use for effect and storytelling. So it's always, for example, there's this band called KORG Bonito, for example, in the UK, and the singer, she is original Japanese, and they have lyrics that are partly in English, partly in Japanese, and it's always a very interesting combination.
Right, so we started with my DJ career, how I got started in Japan, DJing around Japan, and then sort of took a little detour into the Platina Jazz side of things, and a larger detour into making anime music, how that process is done, which I'm sure we will return to, and then a little bit about making lyrics for animation as well. And then if you have anything that you want us to talk about for the next conversation that we'll have, just write in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you back here with Ibon soon again. All right, take care. Bye.